started a couple of weeks ago, started on the series on discipleship, and I spoke about the call of discipleship, the call to discipleship. Where Jesus calls us not just to salvation, not just to be Christians, but to be disciples, and what that entails. What does that mean to be a disciple? Today I'm going to focus in on the cost of discipleship, because discipleship costs. Elizabeth Elliot, I don't know if you all know who Elizabeth Elliot was or is. Elizabeth Elliot was famous for being the wife of, well, she's famous in her own right as a minister of the gospel, not just as the wife of Tim Elliot, but she's the wife of Tim Elliot who went to, I'm not sure what year it was, him and his team went to Ecuador to an Indian tribe and he took the gospel. He was taking the gospel to this tribe, and of course they just arrived and their team were massacred. They were killed. And Elizabeth Elliot actually went back to that tribe and then took the gospel to that tribe after that. And she says this, on his sufficient grace for discipleship. It's the anticipation of that glory of victory that helps us to persevere in the hard times. It's the assurance of that coming crown that helps us bear our cross today. Just 1 year after her husband was slain in Ecuador, along with 5 other missionaries, Elizabeth Elliot wrote, "We have proved beyond any doubt that he means what he says, his grace is sufficient. Nothing can separate us from the love of Christ. We pray that if any way of fearing that the cost of discipleship is too great, that they may be given to glimpse the treasure in heaven promised to all who forsake it." So the cost of discipleship needs to be weighed against what we will receive, against the glory beyond. In our Bible studies, we're going through the book of 1 Peter. And one thing that we notice in over and over again, and a recurring theme, not only in the letters from Peter, but throughout the scriptures, is that the two things go hand in hand: suffering and glory. Suffering and glory. They will always pay. That the sufferings of this time are not worth comparing to the glory that we'll be receiving. And so often, we don't want to focus on this. We so focused on the sufferings that we want to say, no, I want out of this, rather than being focusing on glory that we're going to be receiving. And this is what Elizabeth Elliot was talking about, is that if we just glimpse at what we're going to receive, the cost of discipleship will be much minor. It'll be a small thing, or as Paul says, these momentary light afflictions that are gaining for us a weight of glory far beyond all comparison. That if we saw what Paul went through, and if you want to read what Paul went through, just go through, look at the Corinthians. You know, how many times he was shipwrecked and flogged and so on, and the intense sufferings that he endures, that he calls momentary light afflictions. If I read through what Paul went through, I wouldn't call them momentary light afflictions. They might be momentary, but they certainly weren't light in my opinion. But why did Paul write that? Because his eyes weren't set on what he has endured, but on the glory that lay beyond. And this is what we have to look at and think about when we're talking about the cost of discipleship. You know, is that glory that Jesus has stored up for us worth it? That we will pay the price to be his disciples. Luke 14, from verse 25 to 35. Large crowds were traveling up Jesus, and turning to them he said, If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, such a person cannot be my disciple, and whoever does not carry his cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Suppose one wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, anyone who sees it will ridicule it, saying, this person began to build and wasn't able to finish. Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't you first sit down and consider whether he is able to with 10,000 men, to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he is not able, he will send a delegation, while the other is still a long way off, and will ask for terms of peace. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is fit neither for the soil nor for the manure pile. It is thrown out. Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear. Strong words of Jesus. Strong words that will say, am I fit for the kingdom of God? First thing is, he talks about is the aspect of relinquishing our rights. We live in a time when we are taught to fight for our rights, fight for everything. We have a right to this, we have a right for that, we have a right for ours, a right for what we've deserved, and we need to fight for our rights in everything in life, and this is what we fighting for. Yes, we have got needs that we need to fight for, and we understand that. We have a right to eat, a right, to have companionship, a right to freedom. But Jesus sets out the cost of conditions of discipleship in the terms that were completely contrary to human nature. The desire the desire that the world has. We need to look at what are Jesus' stipulations for discipleship. He calls his discipleship, and whoever else want to be his disciples, to carry their crosses and follow him. To say, I'm going to take up that cross. At that time, every person who lived under Roman rule knew exactly what it meant to take up your cross. It meant something different to what people mean today. Nowadays, carrying a cross means a nicely designed piece of jewelry, polished cross around your neck. And that's what that means to most people today. But what it means then. The time of Jesus wasn't something to be cherished at all. It is a symbol of death. It's a symbol of humiliation. It is a symbol of excruciating pain and suffering. That's what it meant to those who listened to Jesus at that time. It wasn't meant as a symbol just to be carried around our neck, but to be carried in this way. What Jesus was calling his disciples to was the life that he was already living and the death he was going to die. This was what Jesus was already doing. He's already living a life of self-denial. He'd already left his comforts of heaven to come just as a man in himself, and then to humble himself, not only as a man, but servant to it, and not only as a servant, but to die on a cross as a criminal, even though he is righteous. He could have said, no, I have a right to justice. I have a right to a fair trial. He never got a fair trial. He relinquished that right. He relinquished his right to a fair trial. He relinquished his right to justice that you and I can have life. You see, if Jesus fought for his rights, we would probably still be in our sins. We'd still be without God and without hope in this world. But he relinquished his rights to the comforts of heaven. He relinquished his rights to popularity. Yes, he was popular. was popular if he gave them bread, as soon as he stopped giving bread, and then as soon as he started giving the truth, he lost his popularity. He relinquished his rights to that popularity. He gave them up that we might have life. He was calling us to die to everything that we hold dear to life, even our life, to even our life itself, to be a disciple. Tim Elliot relinquished his rights. He relinquished his rights firstly to have a comfortable life in the US, to go to the jungles of Ecuador. And maybe he thought that's all he's relinquishing. Maybe he didn't realize he's going to give up his life itself in a practical and a real way. Little did he realize that he was going to be slaughtered as soon as he encountered the people he went to reach. Elizabeth Elliot gave up her rights to her husband when he went to those jungles of Ecuador, but then gave up her own life itself, risking her life, knowing that she could also be slaughtered if she went there, but she went anyway. And that tribe turned to Christ through her works. But she gave up her life, relinquishing the rights to life that others might have. Even who? Those who killed her husband. And don't we want the right for justice? But she didn't look for justice. She looked for life for those who killed him. Isn't that what Jesus calls us to do? Is that easy? No, it's not. Did Jesus call us to the easy life? No, he didn't. Sometimes he calls us to do something and things that are exceptionally difficult, exceptionally hard, contrary to our nature, contrary to what we would want in life. To give up all that is dear to us. It's called to follow him. When he says that we should hate father and mother, wife, children, brothers and sisters, he's even our own life. In the context, he's talking about relinquishing our rights to them, as our love for him supersedes our love for all others. Does our love for him supersede our love for all others to the extent, so he's not actually saying you must have bitterness and hatred and, to your wife. Please don't. He's not saying that. Comparatively speaking, our love for him would be such that what we do and our uncommitted and unwavering yielding to his will and being disciples would sometimes seem that we even hate them, because we are so committed to him and our love for him supersedes our love for all else. And do we have such love for Jesus to say, forsake all else to follow me? And that's what Jesus calls us to in discipleship. He's not saying, don't detest them, don't detest your wife and children. And sometimes, we've got such bad relationships with some of our family members that we'd be happy to do that. In that case, we should check our hearts and say, no, that's the wrong reason for being disciple. You need to sort that relationship out, because that's not what Jesus is calling us to. He's not contradicting ourselves when he says, husbands, love your wives, and so on. And the greatest command is to love our neighbors as ourselves, and to love our children. No, we should. But we need to take that into the context of what he's saying. So he's not contradicting himself, he's just saying, comparatively speaking, it would almost seem like you hate them because you love Jesus so much. How much do you love Jesus that you will relinquish all rights to do anything that he commands you to do, even if it seems illogical. It seemed illogical for Elizabeth Elliot to go to the jungles after her husband had just been killed. She did it anyway because she said, Lord, I'm not my own. The importance of Christ belong to you. And denying the rights of my life. I've only got what you give me. The relinquishing of rights of my life itself. Examples of the disciples relinquishing their rights to follow Jesus. John and James, when the boat with Zebedee, I spoke about this in the first message. Jesus calls them and says, "Follow me, make you fishers of men." They left their father Zebedee in the boats in the fishing business to follow Jesus. They relinquished their rights to family. And Zebedee says, "Do you hate me?" He could have said that as a good Jewish father, he probably would have said that. "So you hate me now?" No, probably an Indian father as well would have said that. "You do this, you're leaving me in the boat with all the work." No, don't hate you, just love him. That's it. And he's called me. So Dad, I have to do this because he has called me away from you, away from our family business, away from helping you. I know it's hard for you as well, and it's hard for me to do this. But I need to adhere to his call to be his disciple. Peter was married and gave up his family time to follow Jesus. Sometimes our family time, and we're not saying that family time is wrong. It's good, it's necessary. And please have family time. But sometimes we give up our family time. Sometimes we say, no, I can't go out evangelism tonight because it's not family time in the evenings. Sometimes Jesus calls us to just give up some family time to be his disciple. Matthew was a tax collector and gave up his job and worldly security to follow Jesus. Would we do that? Are we so secure in our jobs that we're not willing to give them up if Jesus calls us to go serve him elsewhere? Joan and I both had jobs when we met. We gave them up when Jesus called us to go serve him in India. When we went to India, we just went by faith. At that stage we didn't have any supporters. People asked, how are we going to live? He said, God will provide. Well, that's 30 years later and he's still providing. We spent almost 13 years in India and he provided for us. He supplied our needs. He gave us what we needed. We had our children in India. All our children were born there. UK, we left our families here. At that time, it sounds like it's easy, we can just get them a WhatsApp call. No, when we left for India, we didn't have cell phones, never mind WhatsApp. We didn't, in fact, we didn't have email. We discovered email when we were in India. I'll show you the same times I discovered how old we are. And I can't imagine going somewhere else without WhatsApp. When our contact was letters, you wrote a letter, and if they wrote back immediately, you get a reply in a month. Not immediately. Not a WhatsApp call. When the kids were born, we didn't even have a landline at the time. We had a payphone because it was so expensive to make an international call at that time. You call them for a few minutes when the kids were born, that is it. For maybe Christmas on a special occasion. Would you be willing to give up what you have to serve Jesus? To give up your comforts of what you know to go to a different culture? Because God is calling us to the unreached somewhere else, and that's in a different culture, different language group, somewhere that's uncomfortable for us, something that we're not used to. Or we say, no, Lord, I will serve you, but these are my conditions. It doesn't work that way. Submission to the Lordship of Christ and is yielding to his call of discipleship, whatever it costs. Because he makes the rules, not us. To say no, Lord, I've said this before, to say no, Lord, is a contradiction of terms. If he's Lord, it's always yes, Lord. Because Lord means He rules over our lives in every aspect of life. No, Lord, I will serve you this far and no further. And that's often what we say. The cost of discipleship is everything. That's what Jesus is calling us to. Maybe we're fortunate. Maybe I'll leave you where you are to be a difference where you are. But are you willing, if you does call you somewhere else, to do something different? To relinquish those rights of our comforts of what we know, to take up something else, to relinquish the right to life, and the right to connection with family like we did. We didn't see our family for years. I think it was 5 years in India before we came back to South Africa. Was it easy? No, it wasn't. But it was yielding to Him in discipleship. Sometimes it could be given up the right to financial support when in ministry to work for your income, as in the case of Paul. So sometimes it's the other way around. You go into ministry and you've got a right to support, you've got a right to financial support, and not to get involved in work. But Paul says this in 1 Corinthians 9:4-6, don't we have the right to food and drink? But we have the right to have believing wife, to take a believing wife along with us as two other apostles and the Lord's brothers and sisters. For it's not only I and Barnabas who lack the right not to work for a living. So yeah, Paul was many times making tents. He was a tent maker by trade. And so to give up so not to be accused of pilfering funds from other people, he gave up the right for financial support and work for a living, even though he's called to be an apostle. And so sometimes I hear people who are called in ministry and they're bitter because people won't support them. And we say, yes, well, you can also work. Yes, God provides for us, but there are many times I do work. I do jobs and other to work as well when finances are short. Sometimes I make websites for people, I do proofreading for people's dissertations, like I've just done now, to get extra money. I do extra work as it comes. But I give up that right to say no. You have to support me because you're the receiving end of my ministry, so you need to support me. So as with Paul, we said, no, I give up that right. And that's optional for you to support me or not. Why? Because we're saying, I follow Jesus, not for financial gain, but because He has called me to serve Him. What is it in your life that you love most? Are you willing to relinquish it, to give it up, to follow Jesus? Are you willing to give up your dearest thing to follow Jesus? We need to count the cost when following Him. So many times we're moved by emotion and are full of emotional zeal to commit ourselves to Christ, to serve Him in the church, and change the world. Many fall away when those emotions fade and they just don't feel like it anymore. Sometimes when people call for missionaries to serve Him, and so many people come up and because they feel these emotional pain on emotions, and you stand up and say, I'm going to serve Him for the rest of my life in the missions. A week later, they're not even in church, never mind in missions. I've seen it. I've served in areas where these big evangelists with their big crusades and big churches have led thousands to the Lord, and I come in that area and I've come to those areas. And the churches are right my size church. I'm thinking, where are these thousands that this evangelist led to the Lord? Nowhere to be found. Emotional responses to an emotional appeal. But a day later, those emotions are gone, and I don't feel like getting out of bed. No, I'm following Jesus. You see, emotions. Jesus doesn't call us to an emotional response. He calls us to a logical response of counting the cost. Am I willing to do that? Am I willing to do that? These people, did they respond emotionally to the gospel? Not counting the cost that they even understand what they're doing when they respond to that appeal. A big problem with many modern day evangelists is that they call people to salvation in Jesus, but they don't call them to follow him in discipleship. Jesus never called us just to believe in him. He called us to discipleship. He always called, come and follow me. Come and follow me. We want easy conversion. We want to count the numbers. But when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, you know what? How many thousands of people followed Jesus and fed them and loaves and fish? And then he crossed the lake, and they went around the lake, and they found him on the other side, and he says, "Let me follow you because I fed you." At the end of his life, of all those thousands, where were those thousands? 120 in the upper room. Was that it? Was that it? How many would you see of all those followers? When he said, "I don't believe in him," you see the miracles on that. But how many said, "I will relinquish my rights to follow his call"? I will follow him. I'm not impressed by crowds. I'm impressed with disciples. You see, I've got a small church, but some of the big churches, sorry, I'm not mocking the big churches, but sometimes some of the big churches might not even have more disciples in them than we've got here. A lot of hangers-on, seeing what's going on, enjoying the show, hiding in the crowd. Why do they like big churches? Because they don't have to be disciples. They don't have to show commitment. They can hide in the crowd. But Jesus doesn't call us hiding crowds. He calls us discipleship. We count on the cost. Jesus calls us to relinquish our rights to follow him, but he also tells us to count the cost. He first uses the analogy of a man who was to build a tower and needs to estimate how much it would cost before he even starts. Then he uses the analogy of a king who is coming against him with a big army and says, "Well, think about it. I've got a small army. Can I defeat him? Shouldn't I rather go and count that cost and say, hey, let's rather peace here. See if we can fulfill the outcomes of what we're committing ourselves to before we carry on with it." When James and John asked Jesus if they could sit in his right and left in the kingdom, Jesus asked them to count the cost. He said, of getting there. Mark 10:38, if you know what you're asking Jesus, they said, "Can you drink the cup I drink, or be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with?" He said, in other words, baptism, the cup I'm going to drink is a cup of suffering. The baptism is the baptism of fire. I'm going to that cross. Are you going to do the same thing? He's asking them. Surprised me, and they said yes. Whether they actually knew what they were saying, I don't know. I don't think they really understood what Jesus was facing. But Jesus said, "Indeed you will. You will." To grant that, it's not for me to grant. That they were counting that he was asking them to count the cost of what they were asking him for to fulfill. And what they commit to. So many times we have people saying, yes, Lord, I'll do that. Remember Jesus told a parable of a man with two sons, and he said to the first one, work in the field, and he said, no, I won't. Oh, yes. And the first one said, yes, I will. And he didn't go. And he said to the second one, go. He said, no, I won't. And he went. Which one was pleasing to the Father? The one who said yes, or the one who did it? You see, sometimes people say they'll do things, but they never do anything. It's not what we say, it's what we do that pleases God. Our commitment to Him. The others will just blankly ignore us, will not say anything, but quietly, okay, they will do the job. Which one's more pleasing to God? The one who talks a lot and talks about his commitment and says, hallelujah, glory to God, I'm going to do that. And ends up not doing anything. The one who, you see that the second one probably sat down and thought, we really want to do this, let me count the cost. Do we know what's in store for us? Because Jesus talks about consequences of not counting the cost. See, if you go back on your commitment, after committing yourself to discipleship, you're not fit for the kingdom of God. Not fit for the kingdom of God. How do you know that? Luke 9:62, Jesus said to him, no one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. So, in other words, you haven't counted the cost. You started off, but you're not willing to follow through. Jesus doesn't mix his words. He says he's not fit for the kingdom of God. Secondly, if you can't keep your commitment after starting something, it's not only between you and God, but about others as well. You get humiliated before others. Luke 14:29-30. For if you lay the foundation and not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule the saying, this person began to build and wasn't able to finish. It's like saying, I'm going as a missionary. And a month later, you're back and everyone says, but you told us, you raised your support, you told us, well, the birth church is going to plant, you laid out your vision. And later, now suddenly you called to another job yet. You see, the people ridicule such a person because, and what they really haven't done is counted the cost beforehand. We're not saying that they lost their salvation, but sometimes we have to also say, think through something before you commit to it. Sometimes in India, there are people from countries like the US and they want to go. They taught ideal missiology. And I've since, in all my years of missions, I've learned to go out ideal missiology. Because ideal missiology doesn't work. One of the aspects of ideal missiology is incarnational living. In other words, you go from the country and you go live amongst the people you work in amongst. Now, some people were called to go and minister to the people of the slums of India from the US. They were there a month and couldn't handle it because coming from the middle class lifestyle in the US to the slums of India was just too big a cost. So they went back home. I said, they didn't have to go back home. They could have just realized that they can't count that cost, but can they pull back a little bit, maybe stay in a nicer suburb in the city of Calcutta, and then so and travel into the slums and minister, rather than throwing everything out. Be realistic as well of what we can and can't do. We say we've got the idealism of what God wants of us, but in ourselves, be honest. We can't do that, Lord. And God is gracious. He knows our limitations. He knows our makeup. He knows what we are able to handle in what He's called us to do. And sometimes we have to draw back a little bit of count at that cost. I know maybe He's called us to to minister in certain areas, but we can't live in such an area because I'm not used to that, and so can I talk for a little bit and then maybe travel into that area? So what does God call us to do? What are our limitations? And God is gracious. He's not going to judge us for that because He understands what are we made of. But He sees our commitment. And you counted the cost of discipleship. And then finally, are we tasting or tasteless disciples? Are we tasting or tasteless disciples? Jesus used the analogy of being salt to reveal His will for us. To be disciples that influence others towards Christ by being the salt of the earth. Matthew 5:13, you're the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except for being thrown out and trampled underfoot. Sorry, just get my voice back. Salt gives taste to food for you, doesn't it? Sometimes if you have the most amazing food, but you forget to put salt in it, that amazing food can be tasteless and can be really disgusting sometimes, isn't it? And salt makes a difference. Jesus wants us to be disciples that make others want more of Himself. Not just by what we say, but the lives we live. And by the commitment, because they see our commitment to Him, because they've seen that we are people who are sold out for Him in discipleship, because we are followers of Jesus in practical, wholehearted ways. We're not half-hearted disciples. We don't have half-hearted commitment. We're fully committed to Him. Salt is also a preservative. And our lives and testimonies act as a preservative for society around us, keeping a check on wickedness and influencing others to godliness just by us being there in the area. How many times do we hear testimonies of people being in an office and someone uses bad language, then they apologize just because they know someone is a believer in that office. Things like that, keeping a check on wickedness and influencing towards godliness that's preserved in society. That society doesn't run amok because of our testimony. And that is only when we are fully committed to Him in discipleship. Half-hearted, uncommitted Christians are tasteless and not fit for the kingdom. Luke 14:34-35, salt is good, but if it loses the saltiness, how can it be made salt again? It is fit neither for the soil nor for the manure pile that is thrown out. In Revelations, because you are neither hot nor cold, I'll spit you out of my mouth. God isn't impressed with heart-hearted commitment. He wants wholehearted, fully committed disciples who follow Him, relinquishing their rights to say, Lord, You and You alone. You above all. You above all. You're my first love. What is your level of saltiness? What is your level of fitness and usefulness in the kingdom? But you are committed to disciple of Jesus Christ today. Have you relinquished your rights? Are you willing to relinquish your rights? Say, Lord, whatever You want of me, I will do. Whatever. I will give it whatever. I will count the cost. Because I want to be a tasty Christian. I want to influence the world to Jesus. I lifestyle.